So, welcome back to Driveway. We are back with our prototype racing project, and today we're going to start messing around with figuring out how to run the suspension in the back here. So, there's a couple things I wanted to try since kind of forever. So, we're going to try to utilize them on our project here, mainly just to see how it works, how fun it is, and stuff like that. I easily could have just put in a set of coilovers and just made like a tower mount up here, run a bar across there, mount it up, and it would have worked just fine. But I decided we need to try out a couple things, see how they work, kind of just for S&Gs, I would say, but mainly because I just feel like it. Anyways, let's get this thing started and get rolling here. All right, so back here, these Hondas like to use these weird little horseshoe guys with the spring and shock that kind of slides into this opening here. It just slides in, then they run a bolt to friction hold it together. So I decided I wanted to try to rig up some sort of thing that rigs the suspension horizontally. So that's going to use some sort of pivot arm, and that's kind of what I wanted to experiment with today. So, you know, worst case scenario, everything goes to crap and we can still hook up a standard coilover. But one of the other reasons I didn't want to do that is kind of this side of the engine here that's really close. It'd be easy on the transmission side because there's a lot of room, but on that side there really isn't much room. So we're probably going to have to come in maybe diagonally. That might be entertaining. We could put like a bar at this back straight across, and then wherever that intersects. And there's multiple reasons kind of why I want to attempt to do that. One is we get to use a cheap suspension and shock package that we can tune just by adjusting the amount of leverage the pivot point has. So that's kind of neat. And the other reason is just because it's kind of cool. Anyways, we're probably going to start off with throwing some pieces of steel up into the lathe and making a little bit of something that fits into those horseshoe things. This allows us to put a rod end on and attach to something. So anyways, I'm going to get started on that, and then we'll grab some of the pieces of the spring and shock and kind of see where we might be able to throw this thing into. So we got the basic slug off of the lathe. We've got it kind of grooved in the edge, so we got place to run the weld. And we got the area that we can just feed the 1.25" 120 walls tubes that we got. Kind of the same, actually it's the same stock as what we made the A-arms out of. So these things turned out pretty decent. They just slide down into that U-shape horseshoe thing. Then we're pretty set. Looks like we'll have to probably make them a tad bit shorter because the edge that I put on there puts it dangerously close to that axle. All right, so let's catch you up to where we're at. If you can see this bar here, there's this little body mount on the cross member that I ran a tube straight from there all the way up to the edge of our standard tube. This is going to be like our main mount point for our suspension pivot. And then of course, I took that piece that we ran on the lathe, kind of put a couple trial tubes in there to see what may or may not work. And that's kind of what we got going on there. So, what that also means is we need to figure out our pivot. Now, as I started looking at it, let's just grab this guy for reference here. So we should be able to see our hook here, our heim. Then we got our post here. And then we need to make a mount that is at the approximately the same location as that guy. So we're going to have to come out at a little bit of an angle here. Not too horribly drastic, but we'll come out with an angle on a bracket and kind of put a bolt through it, kind of see where we're going. And initial thought is we might end up having our shocks hanging out here, which would kind of be nice because then you could just adjust the height right from the back of the car. There's really nothing back here, so that should be nice. And we'd probably have a tube or a pipe or something back here to help hold up the back side of the fender. So let's just get a bracket going so we can see if we're close enough to our thoughts. All right, so where we left off just a few moments ago for you, we were kind of trying to tackle our rotating suspension stuff. And so I went through a few pieces, a few welding attempts, a few tabs, a few more tabs, even more tabs. So like it is with any prototyping job, you kind of almost guess until you get something decent. So initially, I started off with one of these bushings. It's already pre-drilled for the grease zerk, so we can put a bunch of grease in there. But after kind of monkeying around with it in there, I realized it's just not going to work with its dimensions. So I went back to the box and got the little bit bigger one. This one here allows us to easier use our misalignment for our rod section. And it gives us a little more room so we can offset a little bit, because with this smaller one, we were getting too close to this bracket for the suspension. Because essentially what I'm trying to aim to do with this guy is I want to get it locked in about here, so there's only like this little bit of space out here left to finish that off. That way I can just run a tube straight out, anchor it off with some brackets, and we'll be good. Previously, it was kind of up over here, and these coils were smashing into the bracketry. So if we can just get them a little bit down here, we should be pretty close to good. Anyways, I've got the back end of this thing jacked up, so that way we get everything as far forward, because we do have limited resources and space because we got an engine in here. So Next step is going to be getting some more brackets, of course. So anyways, let's pull our suspension piece apart here. Actually, I wanted to screw that back together because I needed to weld this slightly longer bracket in here, since I went with a slightly longer bushing. So I guess I'm gonna have to go grab the MIG and give her a couple of zaps to hold it there. Then we can take this piece back out and have fun. All right, so here's where we at with the other side. This is gonna be longer than the tab in there. That way we get more movement linearly. And it pretty much, with a 2-to-1, should double the dampening and spring rate by double. I think I already said double. Anyways, we kind of ended up with this quasi phallic shape for the initial bracket, where we just kept cutting things to see how it moved with the range of motion. We kind of need to have this curve going on here, mainly so when we have our coilover set up here, that it can actually move further in the range, just for good measure. So, that's not too bad. What we ended up doing is I roughly traced the main dimensions that this thing needed to be and came up with a much more refined version that will do everything we need to. Because if you essentially overlap them, you can see we still have that exact same radius going on here. We still have plenty of room to put a hole in there. And then we kind of beefed it up a little bit around the backside. So that came out to about this. This is kind of going to be a special one because it's going to, instead of having this extra hook that was coming around here, that one's cut off flat. So when it meets up with the front bracket, it'll just lay right on it. Right on down there. So that way, this little foot of it will actually be welded to the other bracket as well. So that's going to increase more strength. So yeah, anyways, I got that hogged out. So I guess it's time to just start making some brackets. All right, so we got prototype version 1. That's kind of how our little spindly bracket looks. So that pretty much, just to see if it even works, shove it back in the bracket. Alright, barely got the bracket in. Yes. Jack that up to the high point. Put our piece in the rod section. Something like that. Our bracket's just right there, so it's not hitting anything. And we grab our suspension piece. We've got a washer, spacer guy to shove right up in there. Got that there. And that there. Definitely can work with that. The big thing to see is what happens when we lower some suspension down here. Hopefully we can do this slightly controlled. And there's that. So that's down about as far as I expect it to go. So all things considered, that looks pretty good. Let's hoist her back up. And we'll be good, at least for this next spot. Now we're going to have to figure out how to get this section here picked up, probably with a piece of tube off here. That way we can run brackets up. So we probably want it to be slightly angled down here in this neighborhood, because if we get too high up there, well, technically that's going to rotate down. So either way, we'll have to get some tube and see what we can rig up here. All right, so I think I got everything kind of attached. Things aren't too terribly super hot, but we got this tube run here welded to our main frame, and then we got a couple tabs sticking out from there. We might come back through and kind of box in some of this stuff at a later date, but this should be good enough for now. So we can actually drop the jack and there we go. So, of course, it's going to need a couple more like modifications and such, but we're at a pretty decent spot. We're going to have to go and mirror this on the other side, and then we'll be set. All right, so welcome back. We got the other one installed. It's not doing too bad. Now I am slightly annoyed that a little bit of the angle got slightly different from one side versus the other side, but you know what, screw it. We got plenty of other things to deal with. Either way we're looking at it, we got the same ratio of belt crank, so each side should hold up just fine. We can adjust ride height based off of the bar, and we should be pretty well set. I'm thinking I'm probably going to cut a little more off the bars because I want it to be a little bit lower than it is. Right now it's kind of dune buggy mode, but that's pretty simple since we went with a rod style. So that pretty much takes care of that. It took probably the better part of 2 weeks to do that one, and it took a day to do that one. It's kind of nice when you actually have things figured out. But anyways, let's just wrap this thing up for today, because it has been way too long and I need to get some of these videos rolling out. So let's wrap this thing up. All right, so that's definitely going to be it for today. We got this thing rolling. We can run it through some suspension. We've got basically the rough setup there. We'll take it out for a roll once we get everything working and see if there's anything I got to scrap and start over. But that is the fun of a prototype vehicle. Anyways, next time we're gonna move on to something else. Maybe look at some brakes and hopefully get some more tubes so we can start tackling the front section. We got a steering rack that just came in, so that'll be some fun stuff to look into. Anyways, thanks for stopping by and watching. Hopefully, we'll see you again later.